What is going on, everybody? It is Tuesday morning. We're running a little bit behind, and that's because we have so much to go over. We got the stats you need to win. Hopefully, you made it to the semifinals. We're going to get you through onto that championship round. If you didn't, hey, we just got some amazing stats that are going to blow your mind anyway. Because, hey, we love football. You love football. It's the F Morning After Show. Here we go. All right, good morning, everybody. It is the aftermath of week 15. We have Adam Hulse with us as always. Adam, what an amazing week. We had blowouts on Thursday, we had games on Saturday, we had Sunday games. Last night, we had Jalen Hurts not throw a single touchdown. Just the stats are going to be kind of crazy this week because this week was crazy, especially in comparison to last week. We got fantasy semifinals. You got the family running in the background because it's the Christmas season. There's just a lot going on, and we got to get through it all. How are you doing?
It was quite a week. The NFL schedule is pretty wild from this point forward with how many days that, we're getting football on spread out across some of these weeks. I personally was at the Cowboys and Bills this game up in Buffalo this week.
Nice.
Great trip for the weekend. Obviously not the result that I was hoping for. But yeah, here
Great
we are.
game. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it was
Wow.
fun to
Great
watch.
game for a Bills fan.
But it was a great game for a football fan, and for a Bills fan, maybe not so much for a Dallas fan. They just could not get anything going. The Buffalo defense was just dialed up and dialed in. There was nothing Dallas could do. It was
Look,
interesting
as
to
a
see.
Cowboys fan, it's starting to become concerning how different they are on the road than they are at home. That's a big deal.
Home field advantage becomes extremely important, at least in the minds of Cowboy fans. But hey, even with the loss, you guys still clinched up. You guys are in, so you have that off your shoulders at least. But yeah, I think the worry now is getting that home field advantage.
Yeah, for sure. And it's winning the division, which the Seahawks did the Cowboys a favor last night by
They
keeping that
did.
division race still alive. It was basically over had the Eagles beat the Seahawks last night, but we're in the same spot we were before the week started.
Three games to go for everybody. The AFC is still wide open. We're gonna get into that, obviously.
Yeah.
We got some NFC teams clinched up that honestly are the teams that we knew were gonna clinch up at the beginning of the season.
hmm
No big surprise there. And well, speaking of that, let's talk about how our preseason picks are going. We call this the record watch because, frankly, me and Adam, we went through, we did every single team. We went game by game. We predicted how this whole thing was going to play out based off the teams that have already clinched into the playoffs. We're definitely kicking ass right now. This week, we had a monster week. We both went 12-4 this week. So
hmm
we tied. So you still have the lead on me by a couple games, by 4 games. But I mean, we destroyed. And to go 12-4 15 weeks ago, 16 weeks ago, pretty amazing, pretty cool to do that. We had now, after last night, we had 6 games this weekend that were within one score of each other. We had 4 games within 3 or less. We had the 2 games that went to overtime. Um, let's see, we had, I think it was 12-4 for the home teams this week. Sure was 12-4 for the home teams. Cowboys on the other side of that one, like you talked about. Let's see, what else do we got here for stats? Hurts did not throw a single touchdown, so that didn't affect anything. Locke had 1, Walker had 2. Now Hurts did run 2 in, so that's going to put the pass total at 32. That's going to put the run total at 16. We had the 3 defensive touchdowns, and that's going to put this weekly touchdown total at 51. 51 for this week's touchdowns. Um, that's how the record watch is looking. What do you think of the numbers, Adam?
Well, I mean, it's been the theme of the season. We've been crushing it all year. We had like a little bit of a lull, but even that lull was like going around 500 for a couple of weeks. But for the most part, we've been killing it all year.
It's crazy how well we're doing. I mean, I'm 137 and 87. You're 142 and 82. It's just it's phenomenal. It blows my mind that we are able to do that before the season ever started. We're awesome. I'm just like we're just tooting our own horn at this point because we got 3 weeks left. We really, I mean, it would be near impossible for us to come out with a losing record on this thing. We're going to come out well above
Yeah, I
500.
mean, we'd have to completely tank, and there'd have to be like some crazy, wild upset weeks in the NFL for that to happen.
Yeah. And there could be some of those coming. Let's talk about what happened in week 15. We bring it back. We bring it back through week 15. Talk about some of the storylines. We used to do this game by game, but that just took like way too long. So what we've done is kind of revamp this segment a little bit, and we want to hit some of the highlights. We want to hit some of the things that stuck out in our minds, and feel free to contribute to that because we want to know what stuck out in your minds. But I will start with you as I always do, Adam. What is a storyline that's like top of your head right now?
Well, two teams that come to mind to me, and they're streaking in the opposite directions, and that's the Bengals and the Jaguars. That Jaguars game with the Ravens on Sunday night, awesome game, exciting game to watch. That Ridley, play that should have been a touchdown that got called no touchdown. It's not like the Jags got robbed. They were still down 16 when that play happened. So they still had a long way to go, but it would have been nice to see them call that touchdown, see if the Jags can come back.
Shifter.
And then the Bengals, when Burrow went down, everybody assumed with where they were in the standings at that point, with Burrow out, that they had no shot at making the playoffs, that it was over for the Bengals. They are now streaking. They've won 3 in a row. Jake Browning gaining some confidence along the way. You see all that stuff. He's calling out the Vikings like that's what you get for cutting me and like all that kind of stuff. Jake Browning feeling good about himself, and he should. He's playing great.
He's playing great. They got a great system. Mixon is dominating on the ground. He's doing what he's supposed to do. They've got a nice receiving core, but even Jamar goes down. To me, one of the big storylines from this weekend is the injuries, right? I mean, Jamar Chase leaves the game. We got boy from Baltimore is now gone for the rest of the season, like complete, absolute ACL tear. Injuries have always been a story for this season, but it just every week it gets piled on, and it's not like players that you haven't heard of. I mean, we're talking impact, important. I mean, this hurts Baltimore to lose him for the rest of the season. I know they still got Gus Edwards. Obviously, they still have Lamar Jackson, but that was a part of their game. They were relying on not to be so one dimensional. They're still in the driver's seat, but that injury is going to hurt them over these next 3 games and even into the playoffs, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not a good injury to have. I think that the way the Ravens play and the way that they're built, they're, pretty good shape to overcome that kind of an injury. Like, it's not like Lamar went down. You know what I mean? Like, even when Mark Andrews went down, we all assumed that the Ravens would kind of take a step backwards because of how important he is to their offense. And they just keep on rolling along. So I have faith that, as long as Lamar is healthy, that the Ravens are going to figure it out and they're going to be pretty good.
Pittman Jr., of course, had that vicious hit laid out on him. And the Steelers lose a cornerback for the rest of the season as well. Not to injury, but to penalty. What you think of that hit? I probably should save this for the Pulse with Hulse, but what did you think of that hit? I mean, obviously it was hard. Was it malicious? Did he need to go out for the entire season for that hit?
Well, it was definitely a penalty. Okay, that was definitely an illegal hit. It was definitely a little bit excessive. And look, it's more just a testament to the times that we're playing in the NFL. Okay, 5, 10, 20 years ago, that hit is not as big of a deal as it is today. And look, the defensive players know that. This has been a point of emphasis for multiple years now, and they know that these things are getting more and more sensitive. They're going to call it, they're going to fine them, they're going to give suspensions. The NFL's made that perfectly clear, and that's going to continue getting more and more strict with that kind of stuff with the player safety, coming to the forefront.
Absolutely. Another big storyline coming out of this week: the Chargers don't have a head coach. Well, they have a new head coach, interim, however you want to do it. Do I say? Am I wrong to say finally he gets canned? I don't think I am. When you have that much talent
No.
and you can't get the wins, I think finally, it should have happened before this week.
Well, I think the large majority of people thought it should have happened before this season. That when they blew that that huge lead against the Jaguars in that playoff game, nobody really liked Brandon Staley as a head coach anyway. He was already getting flack before that. And then that disaster happened in the playoff game, and I think the large majority thought that should have been the final straw. They gave him another year, and, weeks ago it probably should have been done already, but, I guess better late than never, right?
I suppose. But yeah, I think they could have salvaged a lot of their season if they had maybe made that change a little earlier on. They certainly couldn't have done much worse. Denver falls again. Detroit just dominate, asserting their dominance again, which is one of the big reasons that the AFC is still so wide open. You already talked about the Cincinnati win. Houston comes through without CJ Stroud, without Nico Collins, without Tank Dell, and Devin Singletary goes nuts, and Houston squeaks out an overtime field goal for the win. That was an exciting game.
Yeah, and I've said this on this show a few weeks ago, that if this Texans team does make it to the playoffs, they're a borderline team right now. They might get in, they might not get in. DeMeco Ryans' name really has to be high on that list for Coach of the Year to do that with this roster. And now you're even adding in all these injuries that are piling up. Without CJ Stroud, they lose Tank Dell for the year. Like you said, Nico Collins. If all of this with this, untalented roster compared to the rest of the NFL, a team with zero expectations this season in a loaded AFC conference, if they can overcome everything they've overcome and get to the playoffs, DeMeco Ryans should probably be the Coach of the Year.
I agree with you. His name's definitely in the hat. Hey, what's going on, David? What's good, y'all? Not my Steelers, sadly. Yeah, they are not looking good for the playoffs right now. Still in the hunt, but we got to get over 500. That's the thing, because even if we make the playoffs, we're not going to do that well. But we got to get that above 500. We got to keep that record going with Tomlin. I want to say congratulations to David as well. David won the Real Reality Fantasy Football Expo Guillotine League. Walks out of there with a PS5. Congratulations, David. I was in that league. I did not make it as far. I've been out for about 4 weeks. But congratulations, David.
David knows his way around a fantasy football league. That dude knows how to win.
He sure as hell does. He put it together. And who else put it together in maybe one of the saddest games that I've ever seen, emotionally just depressing and sad for the state of football. The Carolina Panthers come out with a win on a horribly cold, rainy day where seats were selling for 45 cents, and I'm pretty sure they didn't even sell all those tickets. It was just ugly outside. The game was ugly, but Carolina, they get their second win to help brace my horrible, horrible predictions for this year. But I got to throw that storyline in there as well. CMC, absolutely disgusting. He is the team. He's like the only guy that he is the NFL right now. He is the face of football. I don't know if that guy can be stopped. You look at teams, you're like, oh, they're built. They can do this, they can do that. If they lose a guy, CMC is just ridiculous. I don't know what this guy.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing more that needs to be said about CMC. He does it every single week. He's going to be the offensive player of the year. I guess maybe Tyreek Hill has a chance at it too, but for me, it's Christian McCaffrey with the stuff he does every single week.
Absolutely. Buffalo comes out with the win. I'm sorry, my friend, you were there at that game. Buffalo's defense just huge. Stops Dallas. You already talked about the troubles that Dallas is having on the road. They are going to have to get that fixed up. But Dallas does get in despite the loss. San Francisco is in. Dallas is in. AFC, I believe Baltimore is in. I'm forgetting
Philly's in.
somebody. Philly's in.
Philly.
Philly is also in. Yeah, despite the loss as well. Two losing teams get in. That's there's football for you. And that is really. You got anything else to wrap up this week?
Well, I mean, with the losing teams getting in and three teams being in the NFC, it's just once again showing how weak that conference is and how top heavy that conference is compared to the other one where there's still like 12 teams alive or whatever it is.
It's crazy. We talk about this game football. You guys got some fantasy stuff going on. If you have some stories, some stats, some things that you enjoyed about this weekend, throw them in the comments. Let's talk about them. But there was also this fantasy thing going on. If anybody's heard of it, fantasy football. Let's talk about some of the stats that you guys want to know about fantasy football. All right, bringing up the QBs. Here we go. Fantasy stats. Oh, I want the QBs. I don't want running backs. I want QBs, my friend. Oh, it says running backs, but it actually is QBs. My fault. Hey, look, I got a lot of stuff to put together. This is the QB slide. Pay no attention to that RB slide. 37 quarterbacks played this week, as opposed to 34 last week. 27 of them threw touchdowns. 5 quarterbacks ran one in, but only one of those guys actually made the top 10. A little different from last week. Last week, the storyline was positional players doing things that their position doesn't normally do. The running quarterbacks, they did a lot better last week than this week. This time, only one made the top 10. What else we got in the running back room? 7 threw 3+ touchdowns. All right, well, it was a touchdown bonanza this week. Goff, ridiculous. Definitely won some people some money. Thank you, Jared Goff. 6 of those 3+ touchdown guys made the top 10. Number 1 in pass yards, threw for 381. Not bad, not bad. We'll talk about who that is later on. That was QB2. Number 1 in rush yards, ran for 97. He finished at QB10. Number 1 for interceptions. The big storyline, one of the big things that I talked about at the beginning of the season, the interceptions are not the damaging stat that they used to be. Interceptions are more an indicator of people trying to win games. And so number 1 for an interception with 3 still ends up in the list at QB9. Number 1 in sacks. Sacks can be a problem, however. Sacks will hurt your game. Wait till you see the stat on sacks in just a few minutes. QB18, QB27. Obviously, the sacks did not make the list. They got sacked 7 times. 2 quarterbacks got sacked 7 times. Number 1 in pass touchdowns. Kind of already gave that one away, but he finished at QB1, as he should, but it doesn't always come out that way. Hurts, only top 10 QB with 0 touchdowns thrown. None, no, 0. Didn't throw any. Sorry, Hurts fans. That definitely hurt some fantasy players as well. Let me know if you're one of them. 5 QBs had plus 300. Only 3 of those made the top 10. It's not the yardage this week. It is the touchdowns. When there's that many touchdowns scored through the air, talking about 32 touchdowns this week. Yeah, you got to be one of the guys throwing the touchdowns. Adam, right here on these ones, what do you think about these numbers so far?
Well, touchdowns are important and rushing is important. 2 things we already knew and 2 things we keep seeing the trend in week after week.
Over and over and over. Here's your top 10 facts. This only pertains to the top 10, the quarterbacks that made the top 10. All right, you needed 19.5 to make the list, right on the average. 9 of them won. That is a different stat. Last week, it was not that high. 9. If it wasn't for Jalen Hurts, it would have been 10 for 10. Jalen Hurts bumped the list. One of the reasons that we came on just a few minutes late today because all the adjustments I had to make. Thank you, Jalen Hurts, for that. But 9-1. Only 1 had a rushing TD. We talked about who that was. 6 out of the 10 had 2 or more sacks. 6 of the top 10 quarterbacks got sacked 2 or more times. It was actually a lot more. Only 4 were here last week. These are the stats that kind of blow my mind. only 4 of these quarterbacks were here last week, right? The other 6 are all new to the list this week. 9 out of the top 10 had 2 or more touchdowns. Again, we talk about the touchdown bonanza. And 8 had 1 interception or less. Interceptions, again, not that big a thing. What do you think about this one, Adam? Anything jump off?
Well,
the board
it's
here?
just, with like a lot of new names, and that's been another theme of this season that, the top 10 list keeps drastically changing from week to week.
It
And I
really
think
does.
it, drives home the point that I made. I believe it was on last week's show. It may have been the week before, that the level of competition in the NFL is just better now. There's more good quarterbacks than there used to be. And there's like a lot of legit players on a lot of different teams. And that's why you're seeing the playoff race the way that it is, as well as the fantasy numbers the way that they are.
And I think also, 40 quarterbacks have made the top 10 list. We add another one, and we'll see who that is in just a second. But I think the matchups matter, and I think we're gonna see that in the running back and wide receiver room. It's gonna be more apparent, but the matchups are having a really big influence as far as the bad teams being bad, the good teams being good, and that being fairly consistent across the season, or at least across the parts of the season, that the progression, or I don't know, regression. Let's get into the top 10. Top 10, week 15, quarterbacks. Number 10, Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson just squeaks onto the list. He's got quite a few visits here. He makes it again. Joe Flacco at number 9. He's your 3 interception guy, but he makes it. Joe Flacco, I mean, can we talk about Joe Flacco for a second? He's not, winning the games, but he's playing some ball. Jake Browning, you brought him up already. Jake Browning is the talk of the NFL in the quarterback room right now. He's just, how do you just come out of nowhere? I mean, who is Jake Browning? Jake Browning's been playing for 5 seasons, I think. Is that right, Adam? 5 seasons?
All right. Yeah, and they've all been for a backup.
Yeah, and here he is, taking the Bengals where they were meant to go. Derek Carr. Derek Carr had a fantastic weekend on your fantasy rosters with 3 touchdowns. Gardner Minshew, kind of expected to be here. We talked about this last week. He's one of our repeat guys. Jalen Hurts, been on the list more than any other quarterback in the entire NFL. He's got 11 visits. We've been 15 games, or 15 weeks, 14 games, and he's been on the top 10 list 11 times. Insane. Brock Purdy, of course, just keeps getting it done. Mr. Not Irrelevant anymore. Aiden O'Connell is our rookie to the list, and he debuts at number 3. That's not a bad spot to hit the top 10 for the first time. Those Thursday games were just nothing but fantasy points for the teams that won. Baker Mayfield is your QB2. Baker Mayfield, what a weekend that Baker had. Huge yards. Multiple touchdowns. Tampa Bay's really turning it on, Adam. I mean, they're someone to mess with right now.
Yeah, I mean, Baker played great. He has been playing well all season long. Like when you look at his, week by week, he hasn't been spectacular, but he's been solid, and he has the Bucs right in position to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, they're just doing great. We already know Jared Goff. I didn't feel the need to bring on the suspense there. I've already mentioned it. Jared Goff, at the top of the list. Jared Goff had a game, and it was against a team that you're not supposed to have a game in Denver. You're not supposed to have a game against Denver right now. Denver had kind of picked it up for a while, but Goff and the Detroit Lions, I don't know, what did you see in that game? Why was Detroit that dominant with Denver coming in?
That's a good question, because going into that game, that was a game I thought that Denver was actually going to win. With the way that Denver had been playing well recently, the Lions seemed to kind of be going backwards, especially with their defense. But they kind of went back to their roots in this one. Like though Goff had that big game, they committed to running the ball, which opened things back up for Goff. They stopped getting pass happy like they have these last couple of weeks. That's not who the Lions are. Their identity is running the football and then opening things up in the passing game off of their dominant 2 backs. And their defense really showed up and played a lot better in this one than they had in the last few weeks. They looked a lot more like the Lions from like the first month or so of the season, when they looked absolutely dominant on both sides of the ball. This is that version of the Lions that we haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah, Goff's fifth time on the list this year. He kind of spreads it out. Looking at the top 10 list, any surprises, anything that jumps out, anything that as those names come up, you're like, wow, I got to say something about that?
Well, I mean, how about Aiden O'Connell? Like
Yeah.
Aiden O'Connell to me is definitely the one that jumps out the most. I mean, he's been pretty bad for pretty much the whole year. Then all of a sudden he explodes for 4 touchdown passes. That may have been his first multi-touchdown game of the season, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe
Sounds
he
about
had
right.
one other in there, but he's been throwing basically one a week, and then out of nowhere he throws 4.
Yeah. Let's see. Multi touchdown. That's the first one. He's never hasn't gone for
Yeah,
more than one
the
in a
first
week, unless
one.
you want to count. In week 11 he ran one and threw one, so it's his first multi throwing game.
Yeah, and
And
and and he did it by throwing 4. How about that?
here's a fun stat for you. The last time Aiden O'Connell went 4 touchdowns, week 4 against the Chargers, he ran 3 of them and threw one. 4 touchdowns against the Chargers, both times. Uh, Clearly, Las Vegas has the Chargers number, and the Chargers pay for it. They lose their QB in the process. Jake Browning, of course, is obviously a big story. Again, like I said, Joe Flacco not winning games but putting up numbers doesn't really matter if you don't get the W. However, oh, and one last thing on Aiden O'Connell. Aiden O'Connell actually not the top passer in that game. Easton Stick actually had more yards. So, it's about proficiency. If you're going to put up stats, they better do something for the team. Like I
Yeah,
said,
touchdowns matter, and like you brought up Joe Flacco. I forget
374.
the exact stat, but it was something along to do with your Steelers, so you're not going to like the stat very
That's
much. But
okay.
Flacco already has more games of 250 yards and multiple
Yeah.
touchdown passes than the Steelers have had since Ben Roethlisberger retired.
Yeah, absolutely true. I mean, we know this as Steelers fans. These things don't hurt our feelings. Believe me, we
Yeah,
are all too aware. We are all too aware of things like
yeah.
that. Yeah. That's our week 10, week 15 quarterback stats. Let's keep the train. Uh, Week 15, we go into the running back room. Oh, I lost my thing here. I'm sorry about that. Let's hit it. There we go. Now that we're at the running back slide, this should be the right one. 6 running backs went for more than 100 yards, and all 6 made the top 10. That's a bit different than last week. Last week, only one running back made the top 10. Only 3 actually even went over 100 yards. This week, 6 did, and all 6 made the top 10. I tell you, it's different this week. Last week, we talked about, and we saw on all these lists and all these facts, we saw players doing stuff that their position doesn't normally do. That was your top 10 list. Those were the top guys: running backs catching passes, receivers rushing them. This week, everything lined up. Running backs that made the top 10 list did what running backs are supposed to do. 15 running backs had rushing touchdowns. Only 4 had 2 touchdowns or more, which is always when you play fantasy, you expect these big numbers and these big stats from your players. Well, you almost never see players get more than 1 touchdown this year. Only 4 had 2 touchdowns this week. All 4 made the top 10. Again, in line. 8 running backs caught a touchdown, and 5 of those guys made the list. 6 running backs had 5 catches, and 2 of those made the list. So we see, again, how it reverted this week from pass catching backs making the list to now they did not. Your number 1 rusher was RB2, actually. Your number 1 in reception yards, however, was RB1. Number 1 in attempts was RB5 with 27. 5 of top 10 running backs had, 6 of the top 10 running backs had 20 or more attempts, was what that's supposed to say. Number 1 in receptions is 6. We had 6 running backs with 5 receptions, so you don't get a number 1 there. CMC above 40 for the second time this season. The only other running backs all season to go above 40 at all is Mostert and A-Chain. They're the only ones to do it. CMC, the only one to do it twice. Like I said, he's just on fire. And I'm pretty sure, David, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're still here, I'm pretty sure David was able to grab CMC and ride him to that PS5. So, again, congratulations to David for doing that. What do you think so far here, Adam? Oh, we lost Adam for a second. Oh, there he is. He's back. What do you think so far?
Well, touchdowns are still important. We know that. Versatility has kind of been the key, I think, to this season in general for the running backs. Like I know this wasn't like a big like receiving back kind of week, but we have seen that a lot this year. And what was interesting to me is, like that high volume, still kind of came in at fifth. I mean, volume is always going to be important. If there's a guy who gets a lot of volume, it's definitely one of the ideal pathways to getting high rankings in fantasy football. But we're seeing guys this year that they're doing more with less touches, and we said Devon Achan being one of those guys who only gets about 10 touches a game, and he's been in the top 10 a few times, so being efficient and being able to do more with less. And another name that just popped into my mind on that point would be someone like Tony Pollard, who he got less touches last season and was a better fantasy back last year with less touches than this year with more touches. So more isn't always better. More raises the floor, right? More volume definitely raises the floor. But, the ceiling sometimes can be based off of the efficiency more so than the volume.
It's crazy. I got hit with Pollard this year. I got hit with Aaron Jones this year. I got hit with a lot of those guys. The interesting thing here for me is that your number one rusher this week finishes at RB2. Last week they were RB17. So again, to kind of more evidence to the flip between last week and this week, and that versatility, how important it was to going outside your role. Last week's leading receiver at the running back position was RB13. This week they're RB1. So all those stats actually did that this week, which again I thought was kind of interesting. Talking about your top 10 RBs, just your top 10 guys. You needed 18.3, which is right in line with the average to make the top 10 list. 3 of the top 10 did not have a rushing touchdown. It was that way last week too. It was the top 3 didn't have a rushing touchdown. Still, 3 of these guys did not have a rushing touchdown. 5 out of 10 had a receiving touchdown. Talking about the versatility, 9 out of 10 won this week. That was also not the case last week. This week, 9 out of 10, just like the quarterbacks, won. 4 had more than 1 touchdown. 6 went over 100, which I think last week it was like 3. On top 10, there was 1 top 10 running back that went over 100. This week, 6 of them went over 100. And RB7 had 0 touchdowns. We talked about that. 0 touchdowns, period. So you see up earlier, 3 of the 10 did not have a rushing touchdown, but they still had a receiving touchdown. RB7 had 0 touchdowns. Still comes in at RB7. I'll let you guys mind churn on that for a second to figure out who that is. And 48 have now made the top 10 list as we added 2 names to the top 10 list. Before we break down that list, Adam, what do you think about these top 10 stats as we've laid them out?
Well, I mean, having 40 quarterbacks made the top 10 list, so it's like kind of crazy. Like, it's crazy to me that, a position like running back and quarterback, like you would think that, like, at least I would think that way less quarterbacks would make the top 10 than running backs, especially with all of these, multi-running back systems that we see across the NFL now. So for 40 quarterbacks, 48 running backs, like that number should be a much bigger gap in my opinion. So that's a little bit mind-blowing on my end.
I think that kind of shows, where those positions are. I mean, quarterbacks have to be able to run now, and running backs are losing touches because of that. And so you have a lot more versatility, I think, with that. And then the injuries, of course, contribute to the quarterback numbers big time. We've seen a lot of backup running backs, come in, and Kyron Williams obviously is a big one that comes to mind, and a lot of teams are having multi-head running back room, and so that's gonna, I think, contribute to those numbers as well. But yeah, that's why we have Adam Hulse, NFL writer Adam Hulse, on the show, because kid's wicked smart. All right, top 10 list. Only 3 of these top 10 guys were here last week. As we get into that versatility again, how these numbers just keep changing, the players keep changing. The top 10 list is not the same. Only 3 of these guys were here last week. Let's do this week's top 10. Number 10. There's Mustard. You know he was there. Just lit the Jets up. Lit them up last time. Lit them up again this week. America's team, if you're watching. There you go, Mustard. CEH makes his debut on the list. Kansas City finally utilizing him a little bit. No Pacheco, bring in CEH. Go ahead and not worry about him after this week, as Pacheco is probably back. Adam's spilling dishes, job opening over there in Adam's house. Kenneth Walker makes number 8. He hits number 8 this week after last night's game. They won. They pulled it out. Kenneth Walker was one of the names people were like, don't play him, don't play him. I guess you should have played him. There's number 7. We talked about the running back that made the top 10 with 0 touchdowns, none receiving, none on the ground. Still comes in at number 7. Devin Singletary had a game. He had a game, and he's another dingus pick that bit me in the ass, because I definitely said don't play Singletary. To be fair, I said don't play Singletary because of how uncertain. You didn't know who was going to do well. I didn't say Singletary wasn't going to do well. I just said that it wasn't worth the risk. But if you did happen to play him, it paid off. Number 7 with no touchdowns. Rachaad White is having a freaking month. Let me tell you, last 4 games, we're going to get into him in a second. Rachaad White's destroying fantasy right now. Kyron Williams has been destroying it all season. Ends up at number 5. Ty Chandler, if you took a shot, I did. I took a shot on Chandler. He finishes at number 4. Jahmyr Gibbs, we talked about the Detroit game already. Goff sitting at number 1. Jahmyr Gibbs, RB3. James Cook. Sorry, Adam. I'm sorry. James Cook finally shows up, has himself a monster game against that defense. That's something you would not have expected to happen. I wouldn't have expected that to happen. James Cook goes ham. And number 1, Adam, I'll let you reveal it because I'm pretty sure it's not really any big surprise. Number 1 is...
No one will be surprised. CMC yet again.
Yeah, no big surprise there at all. He has been destroying it. It's not even close when we talk about the stats that CMC is putting up. CMC has been on this list, just like Jalen Hurts, 11 times. He's been number 1 twice. He's finished in the top 5 of those 11 times. It looks like he's finished in the top 5, 8 of them. It's CMC, like you said, he's having Offensive Player of the Year. They even got him in the MVP conversation, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. And he won't win it, but he deservedly should be in that conversation. CMC's just destroying right now. The top 10 list, Adam, tell me what sticks out here other than CMC's dominance.
Well, like CMC's name is going to be mentioned in the MVP, but can we just stop mentioning non-quarterbacks? It's not going to happen. Okay, it's not going to happen anymore. Cooper Kupp won the receiving Triple Crown and didn't get a single actual vote for MVP. All the fans thought that he should be in the mix, but guess what? When the voters voted, Cooper Kupp did not receive a first place vote for MVP after having a historic Triple Crown receiving season. So, I think those days are over. I think it's a quarterback award. Now, James Cook looked like prime Dalvin Cook in this game against the Cowboys. Absolutely ridiculous stat that I heard on James Cook in that Cowboys game. He averaged 4.2 yards per carry before contact. The Cowboys were not touching him until he was 4 or 5 yards downfield on every single play. That is insane to me. That's more a testament that the Cowboys did not show up for this game. Look, not to take anything away from James Cook, but if he's not getting touched until 4 or 5 yards downfield on average per play, that's more the Cowboys defense being bad in that game. Ty Chandler, you mentioned it. He won me a couple leagues this week. Love me some Ty Chandler. Big week for him. And Kyron Williams, man, if he had the games this year, obviously he started as the backup to Akers and he did his time on the injured reserve. In games that he starts, he's the RB3 in fantasy points per game. Kyron Williams, monster.
Absolute monster. James Cook has not had less than 100 all-purpose yards since week 9. He's made the top 10 list 2 weeks in a row now. We talked about, we brought this up before, how I break the season down into 4 chapters because of the fantasy season. That's how I break it down. Weeks 1 through 4, we're figuring stuff out. 5 through 8, that's when that's your buy sell high guys. All right, 9 through 12, things are starting to get in a rhythm, and we should be acquiring our teams and solidifying them for the playoffs. Week 13 through 16, those are the weeks we're in now. Those are obviously your playoff weeks. That's when you're in it or you're not, and we see a little more well, we're supposed to see a little more regularity at the top position, but as the stats said, we're just not getting the repeats. Only 3 of these guys are repeats from last week. James Cook is one of them. James Cook, in this part 4 of the fantasy season, 13 through 16, is 100% on the top 10 list. He had a bye for week 13. All right, so the 2 weeks that he's made it, he's 100%. But the other guy that is 100% is Rachaad White. That guy has made the top 10 list every week in part 4, 13, 14, 15. Looks good to do it again next week. Rachaad White has been the big surprise for me of the second half of the fantasy season. I don't know how you feel about him, Adam, but I am just floored by what Rachaad White has been doing in Tampa Bay right now.
Look, like he's been a good receiver all season long, but he's doing it on the ground now. All of a sudden, like out of nowhere, he looks like a legitimate hand the ball off running back, right? Beginning part of the year, he was averaging like 2.5 yards a carry or whatever it was. It was absolutely atrocious. And he was a good receiver, but he couldn't run the ball. All of a sudden, he figured that out too. And he just keeps getting better, it seems like.
Yeah, he's killing it. And I remember so many people gave up on him at the fantasy season. At the beginning of the fantasy season, they're like, "Oh, I don't know. He wasn't doing very well at the beginning of the year," and it's like, I guess drop him. He's not going to be anything. And now he's one of the top fantasy backs. Especially if you're in the playoffs, you know the power of Rachaad White right now. Who are your guys' top players? Let us know. Let's go. All right, we keep the train rolling along, and we hit the wide receiver room. Here's some facts, some stats, and dats about the fantasy wide receivers this week. This is all fantasy wide receivers now. 9 wide receivers went over 100, and 7 of those 9 made the top 10 list. So like the running back list, if you performed and did what you were supposed to do, you made the list. 9 over 100. That's a lot. It's normally not that high. Normally, we do not have 9 receivers going over 100. What was last week? Pull up my notes here. You hear the paper showing 6. 6 for last week, 9 this week. It was a big wide receiver week. 27 caught touchdowns as opposed to 20 last week's. 27 different receivers caught touchdowns this week. Only 1 ran them in. Who was it, Adam? Who's the only wide receiver to run one in?
Was it Debo?
You watched it. You watched it happen.
A wide receiver who ran one in?
Mm-hmm. It was CeeDee.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, I mean, I forgot that the Cowboys even scored a touchdown in that game, so I was just going through Bills in my head.
You're probably pretty
like when you said I watched it, I said, well, it's got to be a Bill,
I'm sorry, but I'm trying to give you a little something to be positive on. He's the only one that ran one in last week. 21 wide receivers had double-digit targets, and only Drake London could haul those double digits in. This week, a little more diversification with the ball getting thrown out. Only 8 had double-digit targets, but still, only one guy. Only one guy can pull these double-digit numbers in. I guess that's after last week they said we gotta stop giving guys double-digit targets because nobody's pulling them in. One guy really. Number 1 in receiving yards this week finishes at wide receiver 4. Number 1 in rush yards finishes at wide receiver 69. So last week, it was, you needed that. The number 1 in rush yards finished at wide receiver 6. This week, not so important. They finished wide receiver 69. Number 1 in receptions, that guy that pulled in those double-digit targets, finished at number 4. Again, here's the mind-blowing thing right there. 0 touchdowns. Talk about Devon Singletary making running back number 7 with 0 touchdowns. Wide receiver room is wide receiver 4, had 0 touchdowns. He led in reception yards. He led in receptions, 0 touchdowns. We'll let you guys mull on that for a second to figure out who that is. 5 wide receivers had more than 1. Nobody had more than 2 receiving. Wide receivers 1 and 10 are the only 2 on the list. So out of those 5 wide receivers that had multiple touchdowns, only 2 of them made the list. They finished at number 1, but they also finished at number 10. 3 guys with more than 1 touchdown didn't even make the top 10 this week, but they were pretty close, I'll be honest. What jumps out here, Adam?
Well, that receptions are pretty important for PPR leagues, huh?
Yeah. And that's what we talk. If it's not clear, we always talk PPR. I think most fantasy leagues are PPR now. I think when you're starting out, maybe you don't do PPR and you kind of get into that.
No, standard scoring seems like such a thing of the past at this point. Like now there's leagues that do half PPR. Plenty of leagues that still do the half PPR, which I'm cool with as well. But leagues that award 0 for receptions, like I can't even find those leagues anymore.
Yeah, I try not to. I mean, like you said, you just don't see them anymore. I got nothing against them. If that's what you play, that's what you play. I'm not trying to be biased here. I just, like I said, when we report these stats, I do PPR stats all the time because that's what people play, I think. Again, wide receiver 4, 0 touchdowns. You got any idea who that might be? Don't tell me what the name is, but do you have a name in your head of who that might be?
I'm pretty sure I know who it is. I think.
Okay, let's find out if Adam is right. I won't reveal it. I'll give you a shot at it. Facts about the wide receiver top 10s. These are the top 10 guys. You need 22.1 points to make the top 10 list. That's a pretty sizable over the average. There's 2.6 points over the average for the season to make the top 10 list. So you had to come. You had to bring it. You had to bring it to make the top 10 list this week. Only 2 of these wide receivers here were last week. This is the one. When I'm talking about every room, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, this is the stat that blows my mind every single week, how much players are not repeating at the highest level to get these top 10 numbers. So few players are repeating. You got Jalen Hurts, you got CMC, Tyreek Hill, and other than that, it's like 5-6 times and it's spread out through the entire season. Only 2 of these guys were here last week. Everybody else is new to the list from last week. 8 out of 10 here for the first time since week 14. First time since week 14. All right. It's crazy. And I think it's actually week 13. The first time here in this second part, this part 2. 8 out of 10 wide receivers won. 9 wide receivers went over 100. Like I said, you had to bring it to make the list this week. 9 of the 10 went over 100. 7 of them made the list. 7 of the 10 made the list. You just had to bring it. 4 wide receiver 4 had 0 touchdowns. I'm saying that again. 58 wide receivers. You brought this up on the last one. 58 wide receivers. I think this is actually more expected though than, like you said, the quarterback or running backs to have this many different wide receivers.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like wide receivers is definitely the one you expect to be the most and by a significant margin, just because, the way offenses are structured. But yeah, still like that, 40 quarterbacks, 48 running backs, at least to me with all of the multi-running back systems is pretty mind blowing.
Yeah, me too. Let's get into the list. I know that's what you guys want to do. Number 10, T. Higgins. Okay.
He's back.
I'm going to tell myself here. So I recorded the Dingus do not plays, the Dingus picks of the weeks. These are do not plays before Thursday's game, but it runs on Sunday. So I had to edit it and take T. Higgins out. And I had T. Higgins on there as do not play because Minnesota, while they have a 30 to 35% catch rate to outside receivers, Minnesota only allowed 1 touchdown to the wide receiver position since like week 10. They hadn't they allowed wide receiver touchdowns. And so I said, don't play T. Higgins because he may catch balls. He may get you some PPR points, but he's probably not going to get in the end zone. You're not going to get points. Obviously,
remember when T. Higgins was becoming like borderline droppable? And now, like, all of a sudden he's back and like Chase is hurt. And now T. Higgins is like all of a sudden like a top 10 wide receiver again.
If there was more season left, he would be like the top waiver wire pick. I mean, I understand it's the semifinals, so people probably are already locked in, but people are looking at him to play. T. Higgins ends up with honestly one of the best catches, if not best touchdown moves I guess the catch was good, but for him to bend his body like that and get that ball and have the awareness to do that, amazing touchdown. Definitely a highlight reel for the season. Noah Brown, as expected, a lot of people, including myself, picked up Noah Brown, pulled him up off the roster, whatever. A lot of people pulling in Noah Brown. He did not disappoint. He finishes at wide receiver number 9. Devontae Adams in that Thursday night slacking that Las Vegas laid down. Devontae Adams comes out at number 8. Rashee Rice pops up every now and again. That Kansas City wide receiver room, not something you really want to get into in fantasy, but Rashee Rice has been one of those guys you've been able to throw in every so often. Number 6, Amon-Ra St. Brown. He definitely keeps popping up. I believe he's got 7 trips to the list. We'll check that out. Cooper Kupp finished at 4 last week, 5 this week. He's a big name. He's one pops out because this is what we expected. This is what we wanted, and we didn't get it all season. Now we finally get it. Cooper Kupp is here. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Adam. I meant to ask you. Number 4, Chris Godwin. Is he the guy you had?
He was the guy I had, believe me or not. But yes, that was the guy I had.
Believe you.
And it's because in one of my leagues, he was a last second, like those that we always talk about when you make those changes at the last second, they always bite you in the ass. This was one of those rare times where I put in Chris Godwin at the last second into my lineup, and it paid off huge for me. Usually it goes the other way. So thank you, fantasy football gods, for paying me back with one this week.
Like over 150 yards receiving. It is ridiculous. Double-digit receptions, the only guy. Terry McLaurin, love him. Scary Terry in at number 3. First time to the list, which is kind of phenomenal. With the season that Sam Howell has had, the numbers that Sam Howell's been putting up, this is Terry's first time in the top 10. Debuts at number 3. Second rookie this week to debut at number 3. Jalen Waddle at number 2. And number 1, hints all over the board. Who's number 1, Adam?
Jordan Addison.
Jordan Addison just goes off in Minnesota with a backup quarterback. I mean, with barely a backup quarterback, if you ask me, but just destroys it. Destroys the football field. Has a game of his life in his very, very short career. But now he's got one to remember, and he ends up at number 1. What did he have? Like 179 yards or something like that? It was like
multiple touchdowns. Look, like he keeps showing it that, when Justin Jefferson is not available, he is far capable of being a wide receiver 1. So look out for next year, or maybe even later this season, or if the Vikings get into the playoffs, if they can get Jefferson fully healthy and fully back to like being Jefferson again, if you can pair him with Jordan Addison, that's a pretty scary combination, especially when you consider the day of TJ Hawkinson as well.
100%. He had 111 yards. I was being sarcastic when I said 179, but he had 111 yards. One of the 100-yard backs, 100-yard receivers. Here's the fun thing that kind of jumps out about the top 10 list, and we kind of looked at this last week as well. Let me pull this up here. Let's look at this board here. So we got Chris Godwin, we got Cooper Kupp, we got Amon-Ra St. Brown, all on the list. Let's back this up a little bit. We got Jahmyr Gibbs, also on the list. We got Rachaad White, also on the list. Okay. Let's back
Ty Chandler and Kyren Williams.
Ty Chandler, Kyren Williams. Let's back this up a little bit. Oh, look. Jared Goff is number 1. Baker Mayfield is number 2. Brock Purdy's there at number 4 to pair up with CMC. But you guys pick up what I'm throwing down here. I mean,
Jake Browning and T. Higgins.
They're here. I mean, you're getting the correlation. Or are we picking up the pattern? If your quarterback does good, your wide receiver and your running backs make the list, and vice versa. Like, it's just, there it is. I mean, I can't make this stuff up, but I sure as hell love going over it.
Well, it tells me something clear as day, and it's, something that we drive home a lot on this show. We get it during our preseason predictions. We do it during our fantasy coverage. Matchups mean everything. Matchups mean everything. Like, it's not good enough to have good players in your lineups. You want good players in good situations in your lineups. And if there's players that are relatively close in rankings or season-long stats and this, that, and whatever, Every single time, you have to go with the guy who has the better matchup.
And look, check this out. It's going to be confusing. I'm going to put it on the screen for you guys. And I wasn't going to. I was just going to go over the numbers, but I want you guys to see it. I'm going to take this one down, and I'm going to share this other one here because I want you guys to see the numbers here because I'm all about the numbers. That's my wheelhouse. I love the numbers. There we go. All right, so if you look at these numbers, this is a breakdown. This is the wide receiver room. I want to concentrate over here in weeks 13 through 16, and what I do is I have their name. It's the top 10 list. That's what you have. You have the top 10 list. What I want you to see here is how these numbers don't have they don't repeat for players. So here we've got a 2-week streak. But look, other than Tyreek Hill, all right, he's been able to string together some games, especially in the second part of the season. Nobody's stringing anything together. Pittman Jr. did it once. Look, you make it and then you don't. You make it and then you don't. You make it and then you don't. You don't make it and then you do. Nobody's stringing things together. All right. Samuel strung 2 together, but then he strung 3 together for top 10, and now he's not even on the list. But at least he got 3 games. This is the diversification that I'm talking about. Like, you don't know who is going to be here. You can't just say that because Addison finished as number 1 this week that he's going to be here next week. Because if you notice, the odds are actually not good that he's going to be here next week. Number 1, Tyreek here, but look, we got number 1 right here. Ridley, when Ridley did it, he didn't make it the week before or after. All right. Keenan Allen, he was able to string 3 together, but he wasn't there before, and then he comes in at number 1. Not before or after. Not before, put 3 together. Not before, only 1 time after. Not before or after. Didn't even make the list this week, Deebo Samuel. You know, it's just crazy to me. And it's like that for everybody. It's like that in the running back room. You don't see people repeating. You got him, and you got a couple repeats a few weeks ago. But look, all these guys. We talked about only 3 people were even here last week in the top 10. Quarterbacks, same thing. All right, other than Jalen Hurts and Brock Purdy, Sam Howell had a nice streak, but look, wasn't here last week. Wasn't even here last week. Debuted at number 1. Didn't make the list this week. Didn't make it this week. Didn't make it. Wasn't here. Same thing. It's like that throughout the entire season. Adam, what is up with that?
Well, for me, it's 2 things, and both things have been referenced on this show today. And it's that the competition level in the NFL, there are more good players. There's even someone like Terry McLaurin, who you pointed out, this was the first time this season that he cracked the top 10, but he's having a very good season. Like, when you look at his fantasy numbers this year, McLaurin's been great. He just only found his way into the top 10 once. So that's not like a knock on McLaurin. That's just more a praise of how many good receivers there are out there. The other thing is what I just said before, that matchups mean everything. I mean, I'll give myself a little mini plug here, too. I write a ton of fantasy articles over on sportskeeda.com, suggested guides for lineups, positional rankings, all that kind of stuff. If you read any of my stuff, you'll see how heavily themed matchups are to me and how important they are to me and how much they influence who I'm starting and sitting each week. It's mostly based on matchups more so than it is based on stats. And the last point I'll make, look, I know you're a numbers guy. I'm a numbers guy as well. I know you love the analysis process each week as much as I love the analysis process each week. And fantasy football for me is more fun than ever right now because of the unpredictability, because of the depth of options, and how crazy your lineup can differ from week to week. It used to be, kind of set it and forget it, right? Maybe you're debating who you're putting in your flex spot, right? Like, that would be like the biggest debate you'd have on like a weekly basis in fantasy. More and more so now, minus, the top handful of guys that need to be in lineups every week, every player can truly be debated, and you can justify sitting really good players in certain weeks if you have a pretty good player with a much better matchup.
Absolutely. It's like that every week. I mean, the T. Higgins stat, Minnesota had only allowed 1 touchdown to wide receiver since week 10, and he comes in and gets 2. I saw I read multiple articles that said don't play Singletary, don't play Walker, don't play T. Higgins, and all of them right there. I saw don't play Godwin this week. I saw a lot of stuff about don't play Godwin this week. He ends up with 155 yards. I mean,
Walker too is a good one. Pretty much everybody was fading Walker this week, so the brave ones who didn't, it paid off for them.
Absolutely. I think sometimes you get stuck and you get lucky because you don't want to play him, but I got nobody else. I got to play, and this is one of those things. It happens with Kenneth Walker. McLaurin is wide receiver 30 right now, and that's fantastic because in a 12-team league, which most people play in, there's 36 receivers that you need. So being in the top 30, that's where you want to be. Terry McLaurin having like you said, a decent season for honestly a team that throws the ball around. Sam Howell having just a ridiculous season. Hope he gets back too. Now it's time for my favorite part of the show. This is my favorite part. This is the fantasy Hulse. I ask Adam Hulse, NFL writer at sportskita.com, 3 questions. He has no idea what these questions are, and he gives us his best professional analysis, opinions, and data that he can come up with. Adam, MVP race. We talked about CMC's name will be, is going to be mentioned, but you're right. He probably won't get a vote. I personally, I've got like 5 guys. I got Allen, I got Hurts, I still got Prescott, I got Purdy, and I got Lamar Jackson. Am I missing someone? And who looks good to take this thing?
No, I don't think you're missing someone, and it's going to be a quarterback, in my opinion. McCaffrey has no shot at it. But the McCaffrey, for me, his effect on the MVP race, like I think right now Brock Purdy is the favorite to win the MVP.
Do you?
Best team in the NFL this season, and he now has the numbers to back it up. His efficiency this season has been absolutely unbelievable. But McCaffrey's effect on this race is he might actually sway some voters not to vote for Brock Purdy, right? Because they might say, well, he's got McCaffrey, he's got Debo, he's got Kittle, he's got Ayuk, he's got Shanahan calling the plays. He doesn't do a whole lot. He kind of just runs the offense. Now, that's not my opinion of Brock Purdy, but I can see voters kind of feeling that way in that, like, what would be more devastating for the Niners right now if Purdy was injured or if McCaffrey was injured? You can make that legitimate debate, and that's the debate about who's more valuable to the Niners, right? So if Purdy's only debatably the most valuable player on his own team, it may be tough for some voters to actually put his name down on the ballot when they're making those official MVP votes. I do think he's the front runner for now. Coming into this week, I had Dak Prescott as the guy leading the way after what he did to the Eagles. After this performance against the Bills, Dak Prescott is not the favorite to win the MVP anymore, and that's even coming from a Cowboys fan. Yeah. Josh Allen is an interesting name that you mentioned, because if the season ended today, it would not be Josh Allen. What Josh Allen has in front of him, if he can run the table and win these last 3 games, and oh, by the way, did you know that the Bills are in very good shape to still win their division right now?
Absolutely, they are.
If the Bills win these 3 games, that last game of the season is against the Dolphins. All they need is for the Dolphins to lose to either the Cowboys this week or the Ravens next week. 2 losable games for the Dolphins. If the Dolphins lose one of those games and then the Bills beat them in week 18, guess what? The Bills win that division after seemingly being out of it for most of the year. If Allen can accomplish that, if he can run the table, win that division, and have the Bills as the hottest team in the NFL going into the playoffs, all of a sudden he has a very strong case for MVP.
He absolutely does. I like Josh Allen for MVP, but I understand why he's not the front runner. Or who?
A lot can change in 3 weeks, and it's right in front of him, and it's right in front of the Bills.
Look how fast Dak goes from number 1, like he's going to win it, to now he's like not.
Or how about a month ago when Jalen Hurts was basically the lock to win the MVP this year, and now they've lost 3 games in a row, and he hasn't been playing well, especially to his standards. He's been fine in fantasy, of course, because he's always fine in fantasy, but from real NFL, he hasn't looked so good lately. And all of a sudden, Jalen Hurts, nobody's even mentioning his name for MVP anymore.
Yeah. Um, and I think, we'll see how it finishes out. And you're right. That's what it's going to come down to these last 3 games. It'll get decided in week 18 like it usually does.
The only other name that could be in the mix that you didn't mention, and I think he's kind of a long shot right now, but he is worth mentioning, is still Tua. Tua still has a chance to do it as well, because of the way that they play offense as well. Let's say he has,
I think the coach is going to get a lot of credit for that too, though. And
sure, but you could say the same for Purdy, right? Like with the Shanahan system and like all that kind of stuff. Because of, again, the way that the Dolphins play offense. Let's say Tua has 12 touchdowns across these last 3 weeks, and they go 3-0 against the Cowboys, Ravens, Bills. That's their 3 games in front of them. And if they can light up the scoreboard and win those 3 games, all of a sudden Tua could win the MVP also.
Yeah, I mean, he leads in yards by a little more than 1,000. So, I mean,
yeah.
That's the Tyreek Hill factor as well. But, I mean, I hear you. Patrick Mahomes, you could kind of say, is a dark horse, too. You can't really take his name out of the conversation. But, again, not going to win it. I like Allen for it as the season finishes out. You said Brock Purdy is the front runner, but who do you think?
Yes.
Who do you think is going to get it? Like I said, I like Allen.
You're picking Allen right now?
Yeah.
I'm not giving up hope. I'm going to give it to Dak Prescott still. Strong finish to the season. Eagles fall down a little bit. Dak rebounds. He has a good chance this week against the Dolphins, and then he plays the Lions and the Commanders, so he can still get it if he can win the division too. Like if the Cowboys can come out on top in that division, then Dak Prescott can still win it.
Of the guys with enough games and been playing the position. I mean, obviously Browning's only got a few games and stuff like that. Let's see. CJ Stroud has 5 interceptions, and then there's a string of starters that have 7. Dak Prescott's one of them. So, tied for second lowest active quarterbacks with X amount of games,
And when you look at the ratio with all the touchdowns he has this year too, he's still right in that mix. And again, Brock Purdy has that same kind of efficiency with the touchdown to interception ratio as Dak Prescott.
I think what you
They're both right there.
CMC pulling away Brock's relevance, whether it should be or not, I do agree with that, and I think that's why Brock won't get it, because you do have MVP supposed to be the most important player on the team, and even as far as Philly goes, I think Hurts completely fills that requirement. But yeah, I think that's why Purdy won't win it, is because of CMC's success as well. This week in the NFL's tired and painfully obvious attempt to justify the Kansas City call last week, we had like a record of offensive offsides called to include a center who somehow is offsides over the ball on the goal line. I don't know. What do you think about this response that we saw this week?
Well, it's something that's gone on forever in the NFL too, and it's that when you're the face of the NFL, they're going to sway things towards your favor. And they see how upset Patrick Mahomes is about what happened, and he is the face of the NFL right now. Don't make any mistake about it. Didn't we see stuff like this with Brady for many years? Brady used to get all the calls too. Things would be skewed towards Brady and all that kind of stuff as well. And look, there's a debate to be had on that as well. Like when you're going to be the face of the league and you're going to be the best player in the league, some would say they deserve to get some of the calls go their way. Look at another sport like the NBA, right? Jordan did it forever. LeBron does it now. It's almost like they've earned the right to get the benefit of the doubt. In a sense, that's a debate that can be had also, but you're 100% right. The NFL is trying to justify and make up for that call when they shouldn't have to, because Kadarius Toney was offsides, and it wasn't a late flag. It was thrown as soon as the ball was snapped. They didn't throw the flag after the laterals, after the touchdowns, any of that. The flag came up when the ball was snapped before any of that happened, and if it was an incomplete pass, nobody would be complaining about that offsides call. If Mahomes threw an incomplete pass, they get the offsides, they move on to the next play. They're only complaining because it turned into a touchdown. not because he wasn't offsides, because he was.
But isn't it a bit convenient that we had 11 offsides calls, which is record numbers, but 11 offensive offsides calls up until that point, and then this week alone we had like 4.
Of course it is. And it's the NFL putting out that memo to the refs like, hey, make sure you show this week that this is something that we call. And like, I get it, like, and by the way, as I mentioned last time this came up, Peter King put out a good article about this and the history of it over the years and whatnot. And Peter King also mentioned that the end of, before this season started with those referee memos that the teams get, offensive offsides was one of those points of emphasis for this season. It was, and it's already been record numbers this year with how many it was called before the Kadarius Toney one. Now, this week, I agree with you. This is like the attempt of the NFL to see, that call wasn't that bad. We call this all the time.
All the time.
Yeah, and like, I get it, like, obviously we see right through that. But, when you look at it for what it is, 1, he was offsides. 2, the NFL already told teams before this year that they're going to call that more often now. And that, you need to check with the judge, not just point at him and tell him that you're onside. Point at him and wait till he gives you the nod or the wave to move back that you are onside, not pointing saying, hey, I'm good. No, wait for him to tell you that you're good.
And the third question, the coaches. Coaches on the movie. I saw Chargers ditch their guy, which they should have done. Talk of Belichick possibly leaving New England. I don't know. I want to get your thoughts on that. Do you think that's going to happen? And who else is on their way out the door?
Well, I do think that this is it for Belichick. I believe that report that came out that after the London game, the loss to the Colts, Kraft and Belichick, it's not like Kraft fired Belichick. They had to sit down. They talked about the future of the Patriots. They're obviously going quarterback in the draft. It's rebuilding time for the Patriots, and Bill's too old to be here for a rebuild. Nor does he want to be here for a rebuild. He wants to win now also. So he's going to go to a situation, maybe the Chargers, for example, a ready-built team that he feels like he can compete and win right now. And by the way, if he goes to the Chargers, he should bring Josh McDaniels with him so that McDaniels can coach the offense, Brady can coach the defense like they had all those success over all those years in New England. My prediction for the Patriots, if your guy, Mike Tomlin, if those rumors are true that he's halfway out the door as well, I don't know if I believe that yet. I'm not sold that Tomlin's getting fired, but if Tomlin gets fired, I believe he will be the next Patriots head coach. I think Kraft will fall in love with Tomlin immediately and make sure he gets him. That's just my prediction with that. Ron Rivera's done. I think we all know that. With the new ownership and everything going on in Washington, there's no way Rivera's going to survive this offseason. Me personally, I think anything short of like the Commanders miraculously being like Super Bowl contenders this year, this was one of those like, lame duck seasons where like Rivera was going to be fired pretty much regardless of what the Commanders did this year because of the new, ownership and the new regime and how things are going to change. I think another guy who's probably gone is Chicago, Matt Eberflus. This is probably it for Eberflus. I don't think he's gotten the most out of Justin Fields. It's going to be interesting to see whether they stick with Fields or draft a quarterback with one of their two picks that are both likely to be top 10, maybe top 5. The only way I think Eberflus survives maybe is if they say we're sticking with Justin Fields and not drafting a quarterback. Then maybe Eberflus gets another year. But even then, I feel like if they're going to stick with Fields, they're going to say, we're going to stick with him with a new coach that we think can get more out of him.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it. I get it. But I can also see the replacement. We're going to do a bonus question, Adam Hulse. This is the Pulse with Hulse. 3 random questions. Going to be 4 because you brought it up. Do you think that Pittsburgh, that it's time for a change? I mean, nobody has done what he has done. Nobody has gone 17, hopefully 18 seasons without a losing record. Do you change that? I mean, literally nobody has done that. This isn't college where you're required to make the playoffs, finish in the top 10 every single year. I mean, to be never have a losing season, to me that's not a guy you get rid of. But what is the take from Adam
Look,
Hulse?
like while I agree with you on that, it's a goal oriented type of thing. Like if you want to be competitive every year and be in the mix for a playoff spot every year, Tomlin has proven he can definitely be that year after year. What we
Yeah.
don't know is he the guy who's going to make them Super Bowl contenders again? It's been a long time since they were that. Long time since the Steelers were that. They're good every year, competitive every year. But it's like, do they think Tomlin is all of a sudden, with this team that they have now, they're obviously sticking with Kenny Pickett. They just used the first round draft pick on him. Do they think he's the guy to do that? And I'm going to compare it to something for me in a different sport with the New York Yankees, right? Joe Torre had all of those legendary seasons with the Yankees. He was let
Yeah.
go when the Yankees were still on top of the world for Joe Girardi because they said, look, we're not looking to make the playoffs every year. We're looking to win the World Series. And we just think it's time for a change because, sometimes coaches will run their course as well. And it's almost like nothing that Tomlin necessarily did wrong. Like you said, he has a winning record every single season. But sometimes you just need change because things get stale. And you just got to shake it up a little bit. And sometimes that'll make a difference. I'm still not buying it personally. I don't think Tomlin's going to get fired this year. But I could understand if they did just because of how long he's been there. And though they're good every year, they haven't truly been contenders in a long time.
I think it's a lack of talent. You can't just replace a Hall of Fame quarterback. I think we see how hard that is to get your elite quarterbacks and how important the elite quarterback is to today's NFL. There's only a few of them out there. We talk about five. There's five guys in the MVP race, although Sam Howell's had a phenomenal year as well. But there's five guys in the MVP. There's 32 teams. There's 32 teams in the NFL. We got five guys we're talking about for the MVP. So when you lose a Roethlisberger and Pickett's not another Roethlisberger, number one, I'm not surprised. And number two, I don't think it means Tomlin has to go. NFL writer.
You're a Steelers fan. From your perspective, do you want him to go or do you want him to stay?
I absolutely want him to stay. He's
Okay.
one of the best ever coached the game. No, like I said, nobody has done what he has done. Hopefully 18 seasons without a losing season. That's absolutely ridiculous. No way. That'd be like New England wanting to get rid of Belichick 5 years ago or something like that. To me, it just doesn't make sense. But I hear your point. I just didn't change my mind as a Steelers fan, so I'm a little biased as well.
Fair, yeah.
NFL writer Adam Hulse over at Sports Kita. Go check him out. This has been the Rapid Hulse. I think I said Hulse with Pulse with Hulse. Either way, it's my favorite part of the show. That's all that matters. Speaking of rapid, we got to get through this week. It's a fantasy week. It's week 16. It's coming up. Everything is on the line for the NFL this week and for your fantasy teams this week. Let's find out where you can get plays. We got New Orleans at the Rams. I actually like this one. I like New Orleans at the Rams. All your players. I like Kyren. I like Cooper. I like Stafford. Carr just had a fantastic week. Kamara has had a pretty good season. Olave's maybe I don't know. But I think, you're going to play him. It's a semifinal, so he may not even be playing anymore. Honestly, and let's gear this one a little bit for DFS as well, because the teams that are in, we've got 4 teams left. And so there's a very limited pool, and they already know who they're going to play. So when we talk, let's yes, fantasy players, but DFS moneymakers as well, Adam. But again, I like this game. New Orleans, Los Angeles. It's on Thursday. Make some money.
I love this game from a fantasy perspective. I think this can be a higher scoring game for sure. I mean, you obviously have to love Kyren Williams with what he's done, in his starts this year. Kamara is a guy that, obviously in season long, you're starting Kamara. I'm not thrilled about Kamara for DFS this week. He's fine, but he's not the guy I'd want to pay up for. Like if you're playing single game DFS, for example, I'd much rather pay up for either Puka or Cup or both of them than spending all the money on Kamara. Fire up the Rams receivers. Kyren Williams. I'm loving this Rams offense lately. Like these are guys that I want to start every week. Yeah.
3 of them in the top 10, all 3 across the board. I love it. Cincinnati at Pittsburgh. Not a lot of reason to put anybody from Pittsburgh in. Cincinnati, not a lot of reason to think Pittsburgh's going to stop them. So if you've been playing Mixon, T. Higgins is back on the roster. Browning makes a top 10 this list this week. I again, value picks probably from the Cincinnati side in this game.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get a super cheap quarterback this week in your lineup, Browning might be the guy to target. He's going to be one of the cheaper options, and he's putting up the numbers to justify it. A little Jake Browning, T. Higgins stack this week for DFS is not really a bad idea. It's a high upside, lower budget type of stack that you can do, so I don't hate it. I do think this could be a big mixing game, though, like with the Chase injury and whatnot. This is a week I like Mixon a lot. He's a guy I am targeting this week for DFS, obviously for season long. The only question I have, like with the Steelers, is on Deontay Johnson. He's my one like borderline guy. He gets the volume. We know that. He's on like this touchdown streak that he didn't score a touchdown for like a year and a half, and now all of a sudden he scores one every week. So he's like my borderline guy from this game that like I would lean putting him in, but I would definitely temper expectations on it as well.
I like the Cincinnati passing game as well. Since Pittsburgh just lost cornerback for the entire year, Fitzpatrick is not going to play in this game, so they should be able to pass. So I like the Browning T. Higgins idea there. Buffalo against the Chargers. Look, the Chargers are going to be a mess right now. They're still going to play. And I don't know which Buffalo team are we going to get. Buffalo on the road this time instead of at home. So is James Cook going to be, are we going to get this James Cook thing? Is Diggs going to come back? Always you can go with Allen if you want to pay for him in DFS on either side, Josh or Keenan. I still like both of those guys. Herbert should still show up to play, but we got a different coach. And so maybe Buffalo's defense gets something going on the road. I don't know.
Well, let's not forget, too, that literally everybody puts up 1,000,000 points against the Chargers defense, especially their passing defense this year has been an absolute joke. It's been awful. I mean, even Aiden Connell threw 4 touchdowns, and they let the Raiders score 63 points on them.
There you go.
So, I mean, fire up all your Bills. All the Bills you can play this week. I'm even playing Gabe Davis this week. I know he's always a risky play. And, but for me, I like Gabe Davis as a target this week. James Cook, sure, like he can do it again. Josh Allen, he'll probably be QB1 this week. In my prediction, he'll probably, when the week's all said and done, top that list. So whoever drafted Josh Allen this year, it's going to pay off for you in these semifinals of the fantasy playoffs this week. He gets the golden matchup against the Chargers. And then, from the Charger perspective, it's hard to really trust anybody over there right now, not named Keenan Allen. And even he's injured now, too. He's another guy who has the big red flag, or not necessarily red flag, but big question mark. If he plays, you're obviously starting him. You just hope he's going to play this week. Even Austin Eckler has been a big letdown. He's been inconsistent all over the place. With Easton Stick calling the shots and changing quarterbacks this week, it's hard to trust anybody in a Charger uniform.
Absolutely. I agree with you there. Yeah, I love Buffalo. Hey, look, kids, we get football from Thursday through Monday. Friday's the only break you get. You can watch some good college games with that. So we got NFL on Thursday. We got on Saturday. Sunday, Indianapolis at Atlanta. I like Indianapolis in this game. I like Indianapolis. And there's potential for Bijan or something to grab something. But I like Minshew. You just got to hope that Pittman Jr. is healthy again. Anything on that one?
I don't like the Colts in this one. No. Pittman Jr. obviously a concern. If Pittman's not in the lineup, I'm not trusting Minshew or any of the other wide receivers.
That's the thing. You're right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Like you quickly mentioned, Bijan. I love Bijan this week. As long as Arthur Smith decides to give him the ball this week, I think Bijan can have a big game against the Colts. But he's pretty much the only guy I'm looking at in this matchup.
Well, the good news is Bijan was not in the top 10 this week, so that's a good argument that he could be in the top 10 for week 16. Seattle at Tennessee. Seattle, hey, they're eking it out. They're still in the hunt. Tennessee not making things easy for anybody, but even Houston got them last week. I don't know. Seattle's just so hard to play people because you don't know who's going to show up. You don't know who it's going to be this week.
Yeah. Like I'm, staying away from the Seahawks backfield, even though Walker did have a good game last week. I'm not trusting him against Tennessee. The receivers,
goes for 121. Singletary goes for 121 as of an RB7. Tennessee normally allows 3.8 yards a carry before Houston came into town, so is Walker going to be someone that everybody's looking at, hoping that he pulls a Singletary? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, DFS wise, at least, I have no interest in Seahawks backfield in particular, just because I don't know, I'm just not confident that Walker's going to repeat that against a Titans defense that's usually much better against the run than they were in that one. The receivers, I mean, I guess you play your Seahawks receivers, I guess. Like, like you can, they're not like exciting. They're not guys that, you should be circling and going after, but they all work fine as filling out a lineup. They're probably going to be better than most options or all options that are on the waiver wire. So you can do that. And then, when it comes to the Titans, I mean, you're obviously starting Henry and Diop, and that's about it.
Yeah. Detroit and Minnesota, love it, love it, love it. Playing all my Lions. I'm playing them all. Playing them all. Either side of the ball. Except Minnesota's running room. I'm not getting in Minnesota's running room, but other than that, I like it.
If Madison's out again, I'll start Chandler again. Sure. I know Lions have a good rushing defense, but if Madison's out, I'm okay with Chandler. If Madison plays, avoid both. Besides that, you're right. All of them, get them all in.
Washington at the Jets. You can actually get value here. Look, Washington's defense is actually horrible against wide receiver. I believe they're dead last. So maybe we'll get something out of Garrett Wilson if he even cares about playing anymore, which I'd understand why if he didn't. But this is one of those games that you're probably not going to watch, but you might be able to steal something of value in this one. I don't know. It's pretty ugly. I don't know if I'd really go anywhere there except maybe Garrett Wilson, maybe.
I'm fine with Garrett and Brees. I'm okay with both of them. The Commanders' D isn't just bad against receivers. They're bad against basically everything. They give up a lot of fantasy points across the board. So, you can play your two Jets. And, for Commanders, I'm not looking forward to getting any Commanders in my lineup this week.
For the love of fantasy football, I like Green Bay in Carolina this week. I don't like Carolina players. I like my Green Bay players. Period.
I think Chuba Hubbard has some sneaky value this week.
Really?
The Packers not good against running backs, and Chuba Hubbard getting 20 touches lately. Chuba could be a sneaky play that you get in there, and a pretty cheap DFS option that has a lot of upside in this matchup.
That would be the thing for me is the value I could possibly get there. I definitely save a lot of money on Chuba Hubbard so that I could get a Kyron Williams or something. Cleveland at Houston. This should be interesting. I like this one. Game wise, can Houston get past Cleveland's defense? Again, Flacco's been playing well, just not getting the W's. Houston trying to make the playoffs. It's in Houston. I don't know. What do you think about this one? I like it game wise. I don't know about.
Yeah, I agree. I love this from an NFL perspective. For the AFC playoff picture, a lot of storylines to do with that. As for fantasy, I do not like this game for fantasy. Do not.
Yeah. It's just that the defenses actually are playing well. I don't know. Jacksonville at Tampa Bay. Tampa is on a tear. Jacksonville needs to get something started. I actually don't mind playing. I will hear the argument about why not to play fantasy football here, but like I said, Rachaad White has made the top 10 list 3 weeks in a row. I see no reason he won't make it again this week. He is absolutely on fire. I like Evans to get back to wide receiver 1 ahead of Godwin this week. Baker has had a hell of a freaking last couple games as well. Jacksonville, they're going to be trying their little tails off, and it's hard with the wide receiver room, but I like ETN with a little bounce back in this one too.
No, I mean, I like this game actually a lot from a fantasy perspective. I mean, Rachaad White has become a lineup lock at this point, regardless of who he's playing, with how good he's been lately. And look, both of these teams give up a lot of points to wide receivers, and they both give up a lot of passing yards in general. 2 weak passing defenses. I like Trevor in this matchup. I like Ridley in this matchup even more. Zay Jones is going to miss more time. Ridley's going to handle all the targets he can get in this game if there's no Zay Jones either, because as you just referenced too, this is a must-win game for the Jaguars. They are sliding fast. Do you remember a couple weeks ago when they were playing the Bengals and it was that if the Jags win this game, they're the 1 seed in the AFC? That was just 3 weeks ago. Now they're in danger of missing the playoffs altogether, going from 1 seed to out in less than a month shows you just how crazy the NFL is.
It's insane. Arizona at Chicago. I'm not going to say anything. I don't like anybody here. You might play Fields. I mean, or DFS wise, this is the only reason you're not in the semifinals with anybody from either of these two teams.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think both quarterbacks are options for DFS, but I'm not particularly excited about either one of them.
Dallas and Miami somehow slated in the afternoon, not getting a night game or one of these Monday games. That's going to be a fantastic game. Dallas on the road, so honestly, Adam is worried, but fantasy-wise, DFS-wise, I love it. Play them all.
Yeah, I mean, I am worried about Cowboys on the road, but this matchup has Strudel written all over it. This has high-scoring game written all over it. Tua and Dak going up and down the field, and because of all of that, it'll be 13-10.
You're probably absolutely right. I haven't seen the script this week. I don't know. I'll get that later on. New England at Denver. I don't like anybody in that game. Prove me wrong. I don't know, Adam.
I mean, I pass on all of them. The only guy you can consider is that if Ramondre's out again, you can play Zeke. He's shown he can fill in while Ramondre's out. And also, we know how bad the Broncos' rushing defense is. So Zeke's the only guy I'm looking at. If Ramondre plays, I don't want anything to do with anybody.
Yeah. New England at Denver assures that I will be fast asleep when Santa shows up. He doesn't have anything to worry about. I will be out.
I mean, what the heck happened to flex scheduling, right?
Yeah,
like, who let this team stay on Sunday Night Football?
I think Santa did. He wants to make sure everybody's in bed. Like, put New England.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Watching that, get the kid. Everybody's in bed. Everybody's out.
Good point.
Monday, Christmas games. Let's go. Las Vegas at Kansas City. Maybe not the most exciting game, but, Las Vegas at least made a case to watch this game. And it's a division game, so you actually should get a decent game here. I'm not really that mad at Las Vegas at Kansas City. I'm not. Kansas City's going to win this game, I think, handily, but I think you get a good game out of this. Fantasy-wise, I'm okay with your fantasy players, too. I think people can score.
I think you will get a good game out of this one, but I'm actually opposite from a fantasy perspective. I think it's going to be a good game, but a low-scoring game with both of these defenses playing much better recently. Like, even don't let, the Thursday night against the Chargers fool you with the Raiders. I mean, they scored 63 points, so their defense wasn't exactly playing intense football. They were in prevent for most of that game, which is why the Chargers ended up putting up, like, decent, statistical numbers. But yeah, I see a low-scoring game here, and I'm not really excited for fantasy guys in this one.
New York, the Giants at Philadelphia play all your Eagles. The Eagles look to get on track. It is a divisional game, so you could get anything, but let's not get too crazy. I might actually start buying into the controversy if the Giants win this game. I think Philly gets back on track, and I think Philly players go ham and win people some shots at the championship in this game.
Start your Eagles. Sit your Giants, though, minus Saquon. You shouldn't have any Giants on your roster not named Saquon, so you don't even have to worry about sitting them. But I just want to say, as a Cowboy fan, one time, Giants. Come on, Giants. Give me one win here. Keep me alive for that division. The Giants get the Eagles twice in these last 3 games. The Eagles end their year. Giants, Cardinals, Giants. That is a cupcake ending to the season for the Eagles, while the Cowboys got to play Dolphins, Lions, Commanders. Okay, so I need the Giants to steal one. One time, Giants. Do it for the Cowboys.
Yeah, I don't see it in this one. But I'm with you. I got your back on this. And the night game, the last game of the week on Christmas Day, Baltimore at San Francisco. Woo! Woo! That's how you want to end a week right there. Baltimore at San Francisco. I mean, we got elite defenses. We got high-powered offenses. We got all of it. It's all in this game. Everything's in this one. I love it.
The 1 seed in the AFC against the 1 seed in the NFC, the 2 consistently best teams all season long. I hate to say it, but this is a bad situation for the scriptwriter conspiracy, right? Like the people who think that there's the scriptwriters. Oh, really? We get Niners, Ravens, the 2 best teams, 1 from each conference to cap off this week on Christmas Day to finish off the week, and you're telling me it's not scripted?
You're getting something for Christmas. Everybody's getting at least one thing, and that is Baltimore and San Francisco. Adam, appreciate you joining us as always. Thanks to everybody that tuned in, commented, just watched, and hung out. We got more stats coming for you all week. I'll be pumping these things out all week, all these things. But hopefully you caught them. If not, go back and check out the stats that we pump out on the show. They will win you games, and honestly, just make the game more fun to watch as well for me. At least. Anyway, Adam, thank you so much for showing up. Keep the articles cranking out. NFL Writer at Sportskeeda. Go over to Sportskeeda, Keeta with a K. Type in /Adam Hulse. You get all of Adam's articles to end the week. Adam, what do you got?
Well, we have a pretty good slate of games coming up for this week, and it is going to be a fun 3-week finish to this season. There are so many teams still in the race, particularly that AFC playoff race. I am so locked into. I'm a Cowboys fan. I'm on the NFC side, but I'm so locked into the AFC playoff race with all the teams still alive and, legitimately alive. Not like they need a miracle still alive, like legitimately in the race.
Yeah, there's 32 teams in the NFL. Only 4 have been eliminated. We got 3 games left. And everybody that's left, with the exception of the Chargers, maybe the Raiders. The Raiders only got 6 wins. But aside from the Chargers, everybody that's left in the AFC has a real shot. Like, everybody's in the hunt with 3 games left. It's pretty crazy. And NFC is a little more separated. Kind of writing on the wall for most of it, but the wild card, the last couple of slots are going to come down to the last couple of games of the season. So it's coming down to the wire.
Teams are going to be fighting really hard just to go get slaughtered in the first round of the playoffs for that NFC playoff race.
100% true. Because the teams that...
But it's still better to be there. Still better to be there.
Absolutely. If you're not going to get that first round pick, you may as well make the playoffs. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. Check out Adam over at Sportskeeda. Check us out on the Fantasy Sports Corporation Network. Over at That Effin' Show, you can reach me anytime you want to at That Effin' Show. It's there on the screen. Adam at Adam Hulse Sports. That's the show, everybody. We'll be here next week. Stay tuned. Watch us on Instagram. Have a great week. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, everybody.